All right, let's get right into it. We're going to explore the story of sports parks, how they went from being just a simple escape from city life to the amazing playgrounds we all know and love today.
I mean, have you ever actually stopped to wonder why cities have these big green parks? These huge patches of grass and trees, right smack in the middle of all the buildings and traffic? Well, it turns out they haven't always been there. And the story of how they came to be is, well, it's pretty incredible. So, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to jump back in time, way back, to a period when cities looked, and honestly, smelled, completely different. You see, the very first parks weren't built for fun and games. Nope, they were actually invented to solve a really serious problem. Okay, so check this out. In the 19th century, cities were just exploding with factories, and that meant one thing: constant smoke, nonstop noise, and super crowded streets. I mean, it was intense. People were desperate for a place to just breathe, and that's where this totally revolutionary idea comes in: the public park. It was a promise of fresh air and open space right in the middle of all that chaos. And you have to understand, this was a massive deal. Before public parks, the only people who got to hang out in big, beautiful gardens were the super wealthy, on their private estates. So creating public parks meant that for the very first time, regular, everyday working people could get a little piece of nature without leaving the city.
But here's the thing, these parks didn't stay just quiet places for a nice stroll for very long. Society was changing, and people suddenly had something they'd never really had before: free time. And with more time to play, these green spaces were about to get a major upgrade, kicking off what you could call the age of sports.
This was all happening during what's known as the Victorian era. Now, that's just the name for a time period in the 19th century that saw huge changes in society, especially when it came to this one simple idea: what do you do when you're not working? And this is where everything really took off. New laws were passed that actually cut down on how many hours people had to work. So suddenly, for pretty much the first time ever, millions of regular people had time on their hands. They needed something to do, right? And that new freedom just lit the fuse for a massive explosion in sports.
See, before this, people played all kinds of local traditional games, kind of like street games with no official rules. But with all this new free time, those games started to get organized. People started writing down official rule books, and boom, they transformed into the modern sports we all recognize today, like football and cricket. So with this huge boom in sports, the parks themselves had to adapt. They couldn't just be pretty gardens for walking around in anymore. No way. They needed to be redesigned as functional, active spaces for all these new games. And you can see just how clever the design was. Planners started including these key ingredients. You've got your wide open fields, perfect for multiple ball games at once. You've got paths around the edges for walking and jogging, shaded benches for people to rest and watch, and even a central clubhouse where players could get ready. Every little detail was thought out to make it the perfect place to get active. And there was some really smart behind-the-scenes engineering, too. They put up fences to separate different zones, so a football wouldn't go flying into a tennis match. They installed underground drainage systems to stop the fields from turning into total mud pits after it rained. And they even put in irrigation to keep the grass green and perfect for playing on. Pretty clever, right? All right, so the parks are built, they're designed for action. Now let's talk about the actual games that really brought these spaces to life. Okay, so two sports in particular just exploded in the parks: football and tennis. But they were popular for different reasons. Football was super easy to get into. I mean, all you really needed was a ball and a few friends. It was all about community teams. Tennis, on the other hand, was seen as a little more fashionable. You needed special courts and rackets, but it was also one of the only sports that men and women could play together, which made the tennis courts a huge social scene. But hey, it wasn't just about ball games. To help everyone cool off in the summer and get some exercise, a lot of parks added another awesome feature: massive outdoor swimming pools. These special pools had a name: Lidos. And we're not talking about your basic rectangle of water. These Lidos were often built with really cool, stylish architecture and lots of bright colors. You can bet that on a hot day, the Lido was the place to be in the whole park. So all of this stuff, the sports, the swimming, all that open space, it was all driven by one really powerful idea: that parks were absolutely essential for public health. People even had this amazing name for them. They called parks the lungs of the city. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense, right? You've got a city choked with smoke from factories, and these big green parks full of trees were seen as breathing in all that bad air and breathing out fresh, clean oxygen for everybody.
And the health benefits went way beyond just the fresh air. Doctors at the time argued that being active outside could help prevent diseases you'd get from being cooped up indoors. They realized it was a great way to reduce stress and improve your mental state. Plus, they saw sports as a way to teach discipline and teamwork. So parks were designed for everyone, safe play areas for kids, and even outdoor gym equipment for adults.
Of course, for a park to be a success, people have to be able to get there. And this is where new technology totally changed the game. At first, you just walked. But by the late 1800s, railways meant people could travel to famous parks in other towns. Then, in the early 1900s, you had trams and bicycles, making it super easy to get to parks on the edge of the city. And by the mid-1900s, when cars started to become common, parks had to adapt again, building huge parking lots for all the visitors.
So that journey brings us all the way to today. And just like they've always done, parks are still changing, still evolving right now.
I mean, think about what's new in parks today. We've got things like skate parks and climbing walls for totally different kinds of fun. There's a much bigger focus on the environment now, with special eco zones set up to help wildlife. Technology's a part of it too, right? With fitness trackers and apps. And maybe most importantly, communities themselves now have a much bigger say on how their local parks are actually designed.
So when you put it all together, what this whole story shows us is that parks have always been like a mirror. They reflect who we are and what we need as a society at any given time. They started out as this quiet escape from a noisy world, and they've transformed step by step into the high-energy, do-everything playgrounds that are so important to our communities today.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Our society is always changing, with new sports, new tech, new ideas about what it means to be healthy. So, what do you think the park of your future is going to look like? What will it need? It's a pretty cool question to chew on next time you're out there.